Hello there. I have an absolutely mad proposal, and that is that you join me in crocheting a Chasing Rabbits top. Now this is an absolutely mad proposal for various reasons, namely that I have 3 other garments on the go, I have other videos on the go as well, and I really have no business starting a new project. But you guys have encouraged me, you have inspired me with your lovely acceptance of the Chasing Rabbits top to do some experiments. Now right off the bat, I should say, this is not a tutorial. No, my darlings, it is not. If you are interested in a tutorial for the Chasing Rabbits top, one is included in the paid for PDF pattern that is available via Ravelry. So what exactly am I proposing that you join me for then? I'm glad you asked. Let's head over to the office. As you may be aware, I am simply incapable of making a pattern the same way twice, even if I designed it myself, so I'm proposing that you join me for an experiment. We're going to be changing some things in the design of the Chasing Rabbits top and seeing, how the journey takes us, how it goes, how these designs actually make a large or not so large impact in the Chasing Rabbits top itself. But again, this is not a tutorial, this is an experiment. And our only objective is to be creative and see where the yarn takes us. It is not to actually finish this top together. If we do manage to finish it together, that is an incredible bonus. And I'm actually just looking forward to comparing all the different versions of the Chasing Rabbits top that we can make. So, in order to do so, we are going to be frogging back a project. Yes, I'm going to be rescuing some yarn because it is September, almost October, and this very autumnal yarn was calling my name saying, please use me, but I wasn't inspired to actually finish the garment that I had started with it, so we're gonna rescue it. And then we can chat about a little bit about the changes that I'm already planning on making to the Chasing Rabbits top. This is the yarn that we're going to rescue. I was using this yarn to crochet up a version of the V-stitch raglan top, but I'm not too crazy about it anymore, so it's time to frog this back. As you can probably tell by the top that we frogged back, the first thing that we're changing for this Chasing Rabbits top is the yarn. And that is a big change. Discussing it will require fortifications in the form of tea, in case I was not explicit. As we wait for our tea to brew, let's discuss. Why is changing the yarn such a huge thing? Well, my friends, this is wool. And we've got 2 different types of wool here. We've got a merino plushy wool from my favorite dyer ever, Anna of Stitchcraft and Wizardry. And we also have I'm gonna call this vintagey yarn in the sense that it was bought way back in 2018, okay? That's, coming upon 8 years ago. And this is a woolen spun, very woolly wool. So those two are vastly different from a Pima cotton linen blend. The more you wash a linen blend yarn, the softer, the drapier it hangs, okay? Wool, on the other hand, while it does soften with washing and it does have a certain amount of stretch to it, it also has memory. So sometimes it will shrink back, not all the way, but enough to make it markedly different, a vastly different fiber from linen. So changing the yarn deceptively is a huge thing in this case. But I know that a lot of people do prefer working with fingering weight wool yarns, and you may have a larger stash of fingering weight wool yarns available to you than a linen blend yarn. So I wanted us to touch base on that experiment. Now, because, as discussed, the yarns are completely different. We will also have to be changing our hook size. Originally, I designed the pattern to work with a 2.75mm crochet hook. I know, that sounds scary, but for my gauge and my tension, it really gave me the best look with the yarn. But now, I find that this woolen spun yarn just does tend to be quite a bit thicker than your average fingering weight. So I'm gonna call it a heavy fingering, and whilst I won't be swatching, you know, the actual making of the top will be our swatch. I'm thinking I'm gonna have to go with a 3.5 to start and maybe increase to a 3.75. So, huge change there already, which of course will mean that as we work our top down raglan top, I will have to adjust for my armhole depth and the stitch counts in the top, which is great because as this is a top down top, it means I can try it on as I go and adjust for these changes, you know, as we go. Should I just call this video as we go? So right now we're already seeing that changing the yarn will call for changing hook size, which will give us a different gauge, which will in turn give us a different fit. So just by changing the yarn, we actually do have to play a little bit around with the way that we're gonna work our sizing. Now, this is already 3 things that we're changing. The 4th thing that I will be changing is the neckline. But not only will I be starting with the long tail cast on, I will actually also be starting with the short rows. In the original pattern, the short rows are done after we complete our garment. That's our tea. Tea in hand, right. I was talking about the short rows. So starting from the short rows does mean we'll probably have to tweak our neckline a little bit. Now, these are the changes that I have planned. As we work the top together, we will see if these experiments work, if some of these changes were actually doable, and we're definitely going to be seeing the effect of the drape on a linen blend yarn versus a wool yarn. And with that, it's time to actually get started on these changes. So cheers, and we will see you on the other side of the neckline. First things first, we always start our long tail cast-ons with a hook bigger than what we're actually going to be using to crochet the garment. So I'm going to start my long tail cast-on with a 4mm hook, and I'm going to be working the body with a 3.5mm hook. At least that's the idea. We will see how any of this shapes out. As I said, experiments. Fortifying sip of tea. Which actually reminds me that I need to go get myself some tea. So, long tail cast on. Right, we need a long tail to begin. And you know, I've quite forgotten the stitch counts for the Chasing Rabbits top, so flab it. I need to go get my iPad. Excuse me. She is safe. But without battery, because of course. We're getting serious now. You go chasing rabbits when you know you're going to fall. Talamahuka, smoking caterpillar, has given you the corporalis. I need to check the final version of this pattern. Onto the computer. Song is gonna be stuck in my head, Zombie, zombie. Am I gonna get copyrighted for all this singing? Please don't copyright me. YouTube, my singing is deplorable. There is no need to punish anyone else. Okay. This is awkward. But it's also a look into my brain and how I'm like constantly fighting self-doubt. You hear me? You're not alone there. Absolutely not. So we're gonna go back over here, yeah, and we are gonna do our long tail cast on. Right. As the name would suggest, if you've never worked a long tail cast on, I've done several tutorials much more detailed than this, all right? But as the name would suggest, we need a long tail. I know, who would have thunk it? Okay, and we start with a slip stitch. Oops. And let's switch the view so you don't get bored of me. For the long tail cast on, just to review, always make sure that your tail, your long tail, is in front of the hook and your working yarn is behind the hook. So we start by taking that long, well, holding the slip knot, taking that long tail, placing it over our hook so that now we are front to back with that long tail. And it requires a little bit of dexterity, just for a second, okay? We hold that with our finger, and then we take our working yarn and we move it back to front. We make sure that we don't pinch anything tightly, otherwise, as I said, this will be way too tight. So we continue with these same movements of tail over the hook to the back, working yarn from the back to the front, and pull through. So we're going to do this until we have the total number of stitches called for in the pattern. Again, the key to the long tail cast on is that you don't pull anything too tightly. If you find that you are pulling tightly, switch to a bigger hook if that would help. So in this case, I would probably switch to a 4.25. If you don't have that, 4.5, but you don't want to go too big, otherwise you'll have the same problem as with the foundation stitches, which is that in my case, I tend to make foundation stitches very loosely. Now I'm going to stop yabbering on and I'm just going to continue on my way doing all of this, and I will meet you back here when we start our experiment properly. And we're on our way with crocheting our neckline and then our short rows. If we start the neckline with the short rows, it's going to look something like this. So now we're going to have to figure out the placement for our raglan increases. Nothing for it, I'm going to have to count and divide my stitches equally just to make sure that my short rows are precisely on the back, not off to the side. Also, making the short rows first, I don't like the little valley that you get facing the top. When you make the short rows after you finish the top, that valley kind of faces down, and I find that much more favorable. But we're going to go ahead with the experiment, okay, and count. Good morning. We are testing some new audio equipment as well as having a second cup of tea and updating you on the goings and ongoings. Let me sip some tea. That's cold. Right, so let's update you on the goings and on. Oh my god, on the progress. Okay, yeah, let's update you on the progress for the autumnal Chasing Rabbits top, which may not really be the Chasing Rabbits top after we're done with it, you know, like the basic idea of it anyway. So we're back and living inside my absolute favorite Ghastly bag. So if you don't know, these are the Ghastlies. I believe that's the name of the cartoon that goes into this print, and this bag was sewn by Mom, and I usually keep all my autumnal projects in here, but we are updating you on progress. So actually, let's flip the camera around so I can show you the beautiful things I've been working on. I mean, it's just one thing I've been working on. As always, I have way too much stuff on my desk, but the progress we have is here. And when I decided to determine the place of my raglan, I literally placed this neckline on top of my finished Chasing Rabbits top, and then I marked more or less where I had my stitches. So then I counted and made sure that I had the same number of stitches in the back and in the front, and the same number of stitches on my two shoulder areas. So that's a little tip for you if you don't have an existing raglan top that you can kind of like let guide you. Just count and make sure that you have the same number of stitches in the front and in the back, and then the same number of stitches on your two shoulders. Generally, these shoulder areas should have less stitches than your front and your back, okay? For now, I'm going to continue working my rounds, and I will meet you back here later on when probably when I complete my lace rounds. I have a feeling I'm going to complete my lace rounds before the final rows the pattern calls for, just because since we're using a larger hook, these fans are a lot bigger, a lot more open than the fans in my original Chasing Rabbits top, which was crocheted with a 2.75mm crochet hook and a linen cotton blend yarn. Okay, enough chat. Let's just cozy up and keep on crocheting. Where's my hook? After completing 10 rounds of the neckline, I decided to block it just to see exactly how much our wool yarn was going to stretch and how the stretch would compare to the linen yarn. Now, after I dried it, I have to say that the stretch of the fans wasn't as much as I expected, but our gauge, our double crochet stitch gauge, is similar to the gauge that I gave in the pattern for the 3mm crochet hook. So that gives us a little bit of a guideline. And it's kind of like unexpected because we're using a 3.5mm hook, but I have the gauge of a 3mm hook with linen yarn.
Before any more crocheting on this top happens, I think we should take a moment to stop with the crochet and actually try this top on just to see where we're at with the fit and everything. Okay, so it's not as itchy as I thought. That merino breaking it up really helps. And with the shirt under it, I'm kind of liking how it's looking. But at the back, I don't appreciate these waves, so I think we're gonna block this again. And after a second block, this is where we're at. It actually grew a little bit, but at the back, we still got those waves. Okay, before we make any final decisions as to what's going to happen in the back, I mean, ideally, I would love some darts because I do love the armhole depth. But first, let's measure 21.75 inches wide. So, that is 43.5 inches wide. I think what I'm going to do and where we are going to leave off for now is actually going to be me frogging this back so that I can decrease. Now, the way the top lays the decreases, as I said, like I would just have to have increase less here and less here. Now, I'm well aware that this rippling at the back is due to the construction of the garment. When you have a circular or raglan construction, the garment just doesn't stretch the same as if, for example, you're making an oversized pieced together sweater. I'll put a video here of several sweaters that I own that are oversized that I just greatly enjoy wearing, and you don't really see the ripples at the back. This is a fit for my favorite store-bought sweater, and you can see because it's constructed in panels and the sleeves are sewn on that we don't have that rippling in the back. Now this is my other favorite store-bought sweater, and again, a little bit oversized. The sleeves are seamed on and we don't actually have the ripples all along the back. Now this is how she's laying again. You can see some of the rippling. I'm wondering if some of that will go away if we add sleeves. But for now, let's compare the drape of the wool to the drape of the linen. As you can see, the linen yarn is just way drapier. Actually feels a little bit heavier on, but the drape is definitely more than with the wool garment. And for some final comparisons, this is the current Chasing Rabbits top in the wool yarn that we're making, and it is about 1.5 inches wider on either side than the size 2 listed in the pattern. After some frogging considerations and trials, we are ready for the reveal. Hello. This is the third time we meet, not that you would know it because editing is magic. All right, as you saw from the reveal, we actually do not have a finished garment. The sleeves I'm pretty okay with leaving as is, but the body I would like it to be longer. However, the purpose of this video was never to finish a garment together. It was to review, kind of gather information on what changing certain aspects of the Chasing Rabbits top would get us in a garment. So to review, we changed our start of the neckline. So instead of starting from the neckline and then working short rows at the end of our garment, we decided to work short rows right at the beginning of the garment. And we also changed our yarn. Now, changing the yarn was the biggest thing in this design because we went from the cotton linen yarn suggested in the pattern to a to a fingering weight wool. And not only did we use fingering weight wool, but we also use two different types of wool. So the gold one is a very plush, absolutely luxurious, glorious 80/20 superwash merino nylon, and then the more autumnal colorway is actually Romney lamb's wool. Yes, it is Romney lamb's wool. So it is a very woolly wool, and at 400 yards for the 100 grams, I would say this yarn classifies as a heavy fingering weight, and actually I probably would have felt more comfortable crocheting it with a 3.75 or a 4mm crochet hook, but if I had done that, the fingering weight merino would have felt just way too loose. As it is, because we're using fingering weight yarn with a 3.5mm crochet hook, I find that this garment barely has any weight to it. Like, honestly, I wore the linen one, as you saw way back when. I'll insert another clip here. So here is the linen one and how it drapes, and here is the Romney lamb's wool woolly one and how it drapes, how it flows, the weight of it. I mean, I thought the linen cotton one was very lightweight, but having made this one and having worn this one, it feels a lot lighter than the linen one, which has its pros and its cons, right? Pros, we can make a rather big garment and it's not going to weigh us down. Cons, because the garment, the yarn itself and the hook that we're using doesn't make for a weighty garment, then we kind of get that ripple in the back of a garment being too big that you wouldn't get with a worsted weight yarn that adds a lot of weight to the garment. For example, I tried on some of the sweaters I've made for my husband that are raglan sweaters with worsted weight wool, and you can see how they drape entirely different to this one, which is a fingering weight wool using 3.5mm crochet hook. Okay, so that was the change, the biggest one. And because of that change, because we had to go up to a bigger hook size, overall we ended up with a larger garment. I was making size 1 in the video, and caveat, I started making size 1, forgot I was making size 1, then decided to continue on to size 2, but then I realized that the armhole depth would have been way too long, so I actually only did 17 rounds of the yoke before I joined my underarm. Now, because the garment turned out a little bit too, on the larger side, a little bit too large, what I would do differently is that I would keep the armhole depth exactly the same. It's comfortable, it allows me to move, I don't feel restricted at all. But I would actually, right after we complete the round 13 where we square off the fans, from there I would actually start decreasing a little bit in the back only, but still maintaining my raglan increases to create more of that depth. I know, it's kind of a little bit crazy. You're decreasing, but you're also increasing. But we need those increases for a better armhole depth and for a better fit under the arm. But we don't need them for a better fit in the back. I hope that made sense. Overall, those are my changes for the Chasing Rabbits top and my experience crocheting this wool version. It honestly has been a great one. I am going to continue crocheting on this top, just not as super into it as I've been, because coming on to November and December, I do have a free garment series coming up. We're going to be working up two it's kind of like two raglan garments with different necklines. So one is going to have a crew neckline and the other one is going to have a v-neck neckline, and they're going to use granny stitches. So I have to get full throttle on that, which does mean that this Chasing Rabbits top might take a little bit of a back seat, especially because I'm working on, well, technically, I started that one before, so it would have been the second version, and it's going to be a Christmas gift, so that one needs to get completed, right? But if you yourself are working on a Chasing Rabbits top, then do let me know how that's going for you. Let me know what changes you made to the top, what yarns did you use, and how do you feel about those yarn changes that you made. I highly recommend actually working it in Lindy Chain, which is the Pima Cotton Linen blend. However, I understand that that is a very thin yarn and that not all of us can crochet comfortably using a 2.75mm crochet hook. I myself tend to not be able to crochet comfortably if I go below a 2.75mm crochet hook, and I know that crocheting an entire garment in such a small hook is a big ask, but I promise you it will be a beautiful, gorgeous, drapey staple. I find myself reaching for mine a lot during the summer. Not so much now because we're getting into the colder months here in Florida, which is exciting. I'm a sweater girl, and now I won't get weird looks for using sweaters, which is always a good thing. Let me know if there's anything else you would like to know about the Chasing Rabbits top. I am going to be including a blog post with these changes that I made so you can get into more details. Hopefully. That one will not be up this Sunday, but it will be up probably by Wednesday next week. I just have to finish writing up some of the details for this vlog post of the Chasing Rabbits top. So thank you for coming along on this journey. Thank you for being here, and especially a huge thank you if you actually have purchased the Chasing Rabbits top pattern and are making it. It's honestly so beautifully thrilling whenever you make a pattern or have a video and there's actually people that are waiting to make the pattern or watch your video. And I know there's a lot of other creators here on the internet, so I just want to thank you for being here from the very bottom of my little heart. Happy crafting. Bye.